Senator Nia Gill, and thank you for joining our monthly program, The People's Perspective. Today, we're going to have an exciting conversation with Charles Rosen, an innovative entrepreneur and founder of Ironbound Farm, a community-based business focused on regenerative farming practices, hard cider production, and workforce development. Mr. Rosen is here to share how sustainable agriculture builds healthier food systems and how he is using it to build healthier communities. Mr. Rosen, thank you for joining us today. And I guess my first question to you is, how did you become a farmer?
Well, first of all, it's so nice to see you again, Senator, and I can't thank you enough for creating this forum for these kind of conversations, because I think, as you and I both know, often work in a smaller community-based way gets neglected in the big dominant, thinking of the day. And I know as a senator, you have been a constant advocate for being the voice for the voiceless. So thank you. And I'm glad to be here. So to answer your question on how I became a farmer, it certainly was not on purpose. I have a very weird path into it. I'm a former attorney and producer, and I owned an ad agency, and really didn't think that I would find my path to farming, and not only finding my path to farming, but actually finding the secret in nature about how to build a community-based business. So I came into the work, I think, as that very typical social justice warrior. Like I was going to come in and help the helpless and be the voice, but that's not how nature works. And so being a farmer, I've learned a ton of humility, maybe even some patience, and really, I hope we talk about it today, but this kind of path to what sustainable or regenerative thinking means, and how we can apply it to our communities.
And can you explain to us what the sustainable farming process is, and how does it apply to the community that you are engaged with?
Yeah, and I think, so maybe if I start with a little background on
Sure.
how and why we got to the farm and even making hard cider, I think it will help illuminate that. So
Okay.
when in around 2010, I sold my company, my ad agency, to really be more focused on service, on public service. My intent actually was to run for Congress, and sort of made a decision at that point when, again, as you and I well know, often when you understand for whom the system works, you realize it's working really well, and there's not a whole lot of incentive for it to change. And that I just didn't think that was the right work for me to be continuing doing with my, even though I had a deep political background at the federal and state level. So I really wanted at that point to kind of prove that a for-profit business, not a governmental entity, not a not-for-profit, but that a for-profit business could care about human development and environmental repair and community, as opposed to what we see in our business climate today, which is this kind of winner-take-all, zero-sum game, a system built for a very small handful of people. And really, we've seen a rapid increase of the marginalization of people of color, immigrants, and big area of my work and background in prison reentry and for those returning citizens. So I went to Newark around 2011, 2012, with this sort of mission to engage with this sort of neglected part of the community and partner with the neglected members of the community to build a Newark-based business. But we had no idea what we were going to do as a business. I just knew it was like urban agriculture and working with formerly incarcerated men and women, but very much not a business.
You hadn't picked out the apple yet?
Yeah, oh gosh, no. So we were doing a lot of like urban ag stuff, and we were in a meeting with when Senator Booker was still mayor at the time, and we'd always been having a number of meetings at City Hall with his team, and we were in a meeting one day talking about some different ideas we had together, and a woman on his team who was running food systems for the city of Newark, a woman named Stephanie Greenwood, said, well, you should bring back the Harrison apple. And I said, I don't know what that is. And she shared with me the history that one of the earliest industries in Newark, if not the earliest, was hard cider. Colonial era Americans didn't drink the water. They didn't trust the water, so they
Mm-hmm.
drank hard cider. And Newark cider was really the most famous around the world in the 16, 17, and early 1800s. And some even say that the majority of champagne drunk in early colonial America was actually just cider from Newark, relabeled as champagne, which I love because it sort of feels like Jersey's been Jersey forever, right?
Yes, just label it, and it is.
Right, exactly, exactly. So anyway, we said, okay, well, at that point, hard cider was one of the fastest growing segments of the alcohol category. That was before this whole craziness around hard seltzers and things. But
Mhm.
anyway, cider was this growing thing, and it was deeply rooted in place, right? So this idea that our agrarian roots as a state, but also our manufacturing roots, especially in a city like Newark, it felt like the hard cider was a perfect opportunity to showcase our history, bring back this important heritage thing, and do so, you know, with having sustainable principles at play in our practices, um, because the majority of whether we're talking about food that we're growing in this country or producing, craft beers and everything, they're all under the same model, which is strip most of the value from the land. Just take from the land and quite honestly, take from our people, right? Whether you have low paid workers who don't have the proper protections, even just during COVID, and we saw a food system that had primarily migrant and incarcerated people back in the farms, back in the meat processing facilities, back in these factories with no protection, no even masks, literally dying
Right.
on the meat
And
floors.
so did you uh, decide on a position of regenerative and sustainability? And can
Yes,
you explain to us what that means?
I will. So what we said was, okay, if we're going to bring back this apple, but also do so having the hard cider, Ironbound Hard Cider, as a platform to be a place to express, you know, how we employ people, how we farm, everything. We thought that it was critical that we sort of were as transparent as possible. So we made a decision very early on that we were only going to use local ingredients. We were only going to pay living wage jobs. We weren't going to use any natural flavors, any concentrates. We were really trying to go against this big dominant food system of the day. So we spent years finding this thought to be extinct apple known as the Harrison apple and bringing it back to cultivation. And this, although this was not part of the intention, because we always intended to be urban farmers, um, we didn't know that to be a winery in New Jersey, we had to have, I'm sorry, to be a cidery in New Jersey, we had to have a winery license. And to be a winery, we had to be growing our fruit on a farm that at an acreage was far too great that we could be doing in Newark. So we bought a farm in Hunterdon County, a little less than an hour from Newark. Again, not really being a group of farmers when we started. It was me and about 20 returning citizens. So we're out in Hunterdon County with
Well,
me and
that's something to be said for as long as your heart is in the right place.
right. Well, we weren't quite sure what our welcoming would be out there, me and a bunch of guys from Newark. But it was not only were we truly welcomed into the community, but it was the most important thing that ever happened to the company because what I saw out there, I had been so focused on sort of chronic issues of chronic poverty in our urban centers, right? And what we know in a political system and an economic system in our country is that uh, you know if you look at the last election, 100% of the folks in our urban cities, 100% of urban counties voted for Biden. 100% of rural counties voted for Trump. Well,
And
guess
so
what?
how does that go into
Well, I
sustainability
will. I'll tell you
in
because, and
land?
that
Yeah.
it's really becomes part of the model because what we really know is that whether it was President Biden or Donald Trump, um, both the system primarily works for the people in between those urban centers and those rural centers, right? The wealthier suburbs in the middle. And so for us to first on the workforce side, before we get to the agricultural side, we saw that the issues of chronic poverty that we were trying to address in Newark were very, very tangible also in rural New Jersey. So
Mm-hmm.
men and women returning from tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq were suffering from the same issues that men and women coming out of our state prisons were suffering from. So we started to build a model about repair around our workforce that included veterans and returning citizens and immigrants. And even in that, we said, okay, how we farm is going to be part of that repair. So our farm managers are trained in horticultural therapy, and we used a model of thinking about conflict resolution and identity value and emotional intelligence to create stability in the workforce who was going to be working the land. But if we were going to work the land right and be participants in healing the land as part of the healing process for the individuals, we had to farm the correct way. So in focusing on regenerative agriculture, which people talk about biodynamic agriculture or permaculture, but really what the focus is about building a healthy ecosystem in the soil. It's about creating a system of diverse organisms that support one another in the soil. And what's amazing is as each organism in the system gets stronger, the whole system gets stronger, right?
Life lesson.
Right. Well, that was this epiphany that we had when we started to work the land this way. And you started to see that the microbiological life in the soil is feeding the trees, and literally, like our trees, our apple trees, there's huge periods in the year where they're literally starving themselves to put all of their energy into the soil to take care of that microbiological life that's taking care of them. The trees know that those invisible creatures are keeping them strong. And so this idea of an ecosystem where each individual gets stronger in its relationship to other people. So the reason why I was bringing up, even the political space or economic space, we live in a society and we have a corporate model that's primarily saying my success, I have the opportunity to rise up and be whatever I want as long as there's not other people in my way, right? So I'm going to succeed as long as you get out of my way. That's not what we practice at Ironbound. That's not what regenerative agriculture is about. What regenerative agriculture is about saying, no, my success is connected to yours. There's a oneness to the universe, right? The oneness of the universe where we are all one thing, and we are connected to the land that we share, and we are connected to the food that we eat. And in that
And it
oneness,
sounds very much like indigenous uh, cultures and populations, the Native
bingo, bingo.
American.
I am so honored to work with a number of indigenous farmers, the BIPOC community that we're really trying to weave into our community. And there's farmers here in New Jersey, a gentleman named Chief Man who just understands land use and even the simplest things. I was with one of our indigenous colleagues one day, and we were on the farm, and I thought he was coming really to be pretty impressed with everything that we were doing, and he kept sort of referring to me as the property owner, no matter what we were talking about. He was talking about me as a property owner, and I was finally like, why do you keep saying that? He said, because Charles, despite all of the work we are trying to do here, you are still just part of that system where you were taking from the land to be part of this other marketplace. And in my culture, he said, we don't believe in the idea of land ownership. There's no such thing. We can work with the land, we honor the land can provide for us, but it is not ours to dominate. And just thinking about indigenous land use, and even in a simple way, there's a very basic model in native farming known as the Three Sisters. And I don't know if
Mhm.
you're familiar with this, but it's corn, beans, and squashes. And so what happens is the corns are a stock for the beans. The beans provide nitrogen in the soil. The squashes protect the earth, and it's all one integrated system. So under that Three Sisters model, that is how we farm. So at Ironbound, all of our animals, so all of our chickens and turkeys and ducks, they do all of our pest management. So we don't use pesticides. They're eating all of the pests in between the trees, so we don't have to spray. Our pigs do all of the rooting, so we don't have to till the soil. So goats do weed management. So, and when you're planting produce, in between the alleys of the trees, everything is benefiting from one another. Even in our flowers, we have almost 19 acres of pollinator strips that go back and forth across our farm that are attracting native bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, but they're also our cut flower business. So it's this oneness again of the universe, and most importantly in our work, what we see is without that model, I think I would still be stuck in this idea of like, oh, I'm going to go to Newark from Montclair and help poor folk, right? And we know that's not how you build community. So what I've learned from nature, what I've learned from farming, is this idea of the oneness, but also what I've learned, and maybe this is the most important thing, transformation takes time. Whether we're talking about transforming the land or a human being who is, primarily men, when men are coming out of prison, we have a prison industrial complex where the goal is to break these men down to nothing, right? To really break them down spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, right? So that they're not a threat. Well, you can't just come out of a state like that. For when many of our folks that we work with have been in there for 10, 20 years, you don't just come out and take a course or get a job. I thought living wage jobs was the goal. I learned that no, the job is just the very beginning, because these people need time to transfer. And, I've shared with you offline before, many months ago, I don't know if you remember, but to me, the most telling example of this is we have a gentleman who started with us right from the beginning, from Essex County, and, spent most of his adult life in and out of prison. And farming with us from day one. And during the pandemic, it's a gentleman named James. James came to me, said that his wife had lost her job as a catering chef. She was working with the Courtyard Marriott system for over 20 years. She lost her job during the pandemic, so we brought her on board as one of the chefs at our tasting room at Ironbound Farm. And a few months later, James said, his wife Natasha was leaving the farm. And I was like, what are you talking about?
That she worked at the farm and what?
So she worked at the farm as a chef.
Okay, so what goes on at the farm?
Oh, sorry. So because we make this hard cider and we're a winery, we have visitors from, everywhere coming on the weekends. We only use food that we're growing or our neighboring farms. We've built this local community. We have our farm market and our farm share, but also people eat. We only cook on open flame outside, and it's a way to celebrate the sort of food and wines that we are producing.
So it's a more robust experience. It's not.
Yes, it's a
simply
fully
picking apples, but there's.
No, it's all agro-tourism. So it's coming and seeing this stuff in action, seeing whether we're taking a walk in the woods and we're teaching people about foraging, or we're having gardening classes or whatever, or a butchering class that culminates into a full meal. But again, every single thing we serve is from local New Jersey farms, either our farm or our neighboring farms. So even if we're doing something as silly as just a hamburger, the beef is coming from cotton cattle. The grains for the buns are made with River Valley Community Grains, a group of guys that are growing ancient grains now in our state. The tomatoes, the lettuce, the cheeses, everything is from us and this group, and it's just a burger, right? So anyway, Natasha was part of our team for cooking all the food, and she's an amazing chef from Trinidad. And anyway, a few months into her working with us, for barely any time, James said Natasha's leaving the farm. And I said, well, why? She just got here. And he said, because I found a little restaurant in East Orange that I decided to buy for her for our anniversary. And I said,
nice anniversary present.
Well, I said, James, are you insane? You're opening a restaurant during the middle of a pandemic when everybody that knows how to run a restaurant is shutting down. What are you doing? Are you nuts? And he said, no. He said, my community doesn't have food. And I believe in my wife, and I love my wife, and she's an amazing chef, and she will prepare food for our community. So I said, now, James, I think you're a bigger jerk than I thought you were, because you're making the rest of us as husbands look like such jerks because we don't believe in our wives.
Take those flowers back, guys.
Exactly. So they started a restaurant in East Orange. And so I said to him, look, man, if you're going to do this, we're doing it together. We got to figure out how to source food for the restaurant. We're going to go back and forth and build this partnership. Well, some time ago, almost a year ago now, at the grand opening, the mayor of East Orange was there. Every local person was there. And so here's a guy who spent his life in the gangs, in and out of prison, and now the restaurant, he has, kids in the neighborhood around East Orange planting these heritage apple trees. And if they work on the trees and plant the trees, they get to eat at the restaurant for free. And so we're extending what we're doing at the farm into East Orange in this partnership way. So instead of, James just being at the farm, no, it's this idea of how do we extend it into our local communities, right? So, and really, kids from his street come in all the time. They're like, there's no such thing as a black farmer. And he, points to a picture on the wall. He's like, well, that's me. And those are my boys. And we're farmers. So he thinks of himself, they call themselves the farmer and the chef, right? And they're a husband and wife team. The food is insane. But the reason why I'm bringing all that up is to say I didn't know that that's what repair really looked like. I didn't know how best to build a partnership with James or build a way. I thought, if we create a job and no, it was this. But the main part of it, because I brought this all up when I said that transformation takes time. James and I have been working together for 7 years. This is not where he started. His identity when he got to the farm, believe me, wasn't about being a farmer. His street cred didn't come from him as farmer. It took years of us trying things and failing epically and falling backwards and then just getting back up together and having the courage to try again and learn from those mistakes. But when you think about the time that it takes to heal an individual or heal the earth where we're growing food, or even our own bodies, we don't live in a society that really honors that. We live in a society that's about instant gratification.
So by honoring the healing process, it extends not only to the land, but those who work the land, and the ability to create opportunity for partnership, which I think is very unique with respect to what you're doing, is that you create an opportunity for partnership that expands the horizon of the participant
That's right.
and opens up new avenues of both economic engagement and helping the community heal by being the farmer and the chef. And and
you know what else?
That is a real lesson I think we can learn from you and from your experience, even in how we govern or deal with our neighbor.
Yes.
Or interact with someone on the street in town. That this is not simply a hello, goodbye, but this is a real time to have a human interaction. So what impact have your practice on the community, you think, with those you work with have had?
I don't know. Candidly, it's a hard question to answer. I feel like we've had tremendous failures. I was mentioning most of the folks that we've worked with, are either back in prison or, God forbid, even dead. And getting extricated from gang activity is hard. And when a human being is in survival mode, you're only thinking about the short-term crisis. Can I get to a job? Can I get enough food on the table? Can I do this? Can I do that? And that's how our brains are wired to survive.
And don't you help them get to the job? Don't transport
everything. We subsidize housing. If people stay in the greater Newark area, we pay for their commuting. We pay living wage jobs. We pay 100% of health insurance. But you know what? None of that is necessarily enough to get over a hurdle. If we have 3 black guys coming out from Newark on the state, interstate, we call it the third man rule. They're getting stopped by a state trooper every time. They got to carry an ID card that talks about the company and who's their parole officer and my information and the fact that I'm an attorney. And, just to get to work for so many days, it's a hurdle. or you have a child that's homesick, or maybe we had, a pandemic where kids had to be home on Zoom, going to school. All of those daily struggles, it takes time to build the resiliency to be able to navigate that. But I think, to your point, if we get that the only way this works is we're in it together, maybe we have patience and maybe we can treat each other with a little more grace. And this model that we're building applies to any sector you can think of. We're doing it in food systems, but right now what we're in the middle of building, this idea that a local food system that can support and create resiliency for farmers, the value add producers, I mean, people taking tomatoes and turning them into tomato sauce, and then a network of retailers where we can control the shelves together. Because I guarantee you this, look, our ad agency was world famous. We created some of the largest alcohol brands that you know in the country. I can't get my hard cider on shelf against Anheuser-Busch or Sam Adams, because they have so much money to buy those shelves. So, but if we can control a local food system, if we take one of our licenses and have it at Natasha's restaurant so she can sell our hard ciders, so now she has another revenue stream.
So it could be that not only is all politics local, but all farming is local as well. And what I want to make sure that we let the viewers know, how can they get in contact with you? How can they help? And what's the location of the farm? So if I'm coming to visit, I'm going to pick my apple and make sure I have one with a little brandy in it, and I'm looking for the hard side.
The good news is people can help mostly by eating and drinking. So
that's a good thing. That's good.
I think it's why I'm the only farmer in the state that's getting fatter, because it mostly seems to be eating and drinking. It's not
so can you give us that information?
Yeah. So, the farm is in a town in Hunterdon County called Asbury. So not Asbury Park, but Asbury, on Route 78. And so Ironbound Farm is open, every weekend, and we have ticketed dinners, but we also have the fun tasting room so they can come. Our hard ciders and hard seltzers are available literally in every liquor store and most bars throughout the state. But the other thing, so it's either coming out or buying our stuff there. But we are right now in the middle of building a really great network of, as I think in the legislature, I think 10 plus years ago, whatever, granted wineries in our state these outlet license to allow us to sell our wines at 15 unlicensed establishments. Well, we're building a network of women and minority-owned businesses. One in Jersey City, one in Montclair, one obviously in East Orange, two in Newark with Adina, who owns Cornbread, the most incredible restaurants. So what we're doing is we're building a local network where we and other farmers are going to be growing the food for those existing businesses in and around the areas that I was mentioning, so that when we're distributing our alcohol through them, so they don't need a liquor license, they have this other revenue stream, but it's this give and take. But what gets really exciting, when we take our stuff to Natasha's restaurant at Tasha's Grill in East Orange, and we take back her produced jerk chicken sauce, and then we distribute that jerk chicken sauce at all of those 15 places, plus our market our market at the farm. Now all of a sudden there's shelves. She can have her jerk chicken sauce on shelf at 16 places, and she doesn't have to fight to try to get in a ShopRite.
So now you kind of understand why I said that you were an innovative entrepreneur.
Well, thank you. And I will tell you honestly, and it's critical to point out that dominant food system, that has private prisons lending them inmates to grow our food, or the treatment of migrant workers, we can't compete in that space, whether it's as a farm or a hard cider. But by building this community system, again, I don't know if you know two restaurants on Halsey Street in Newark, but one at one end, Burger Wall, and the other end, Cornbread. These are two incredible Newark entrepreneurs. Incredible. The food's amazing. As we build this system together, I don't need to have a brick and mortar place in Newark. They do. And they can get now affordable, local, organic food because we're collapsing the supply chain.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rosen, for joining us. This has been fascinating. We want to be part of it, moving it forward. And
Great.
I salute you and everyone else who is involved in this endeavor. And then next month, we will be discussing some more issues that impact our community. This is the People's Perspective. I'm Senator Nia Gill, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Senator. So
Thank
good to
you.
see you.
You too.